Dust motes danced in the lamplight, settling slow on my gloved hands as I sorted faded letters from 1892. The archive smelled of aged paper and quiet secrets, the kind I kept locked away in my desk drawer. Sketches of women from history, their faces drawn from shadows in my mind. I didn't come here seeking eyes on those hidden lines, just a steady job, cataloging the past without letting it touch mine. Her voice cut through the silence like a key turning in a rusted lock. If you undress your secret for me, I'll show you how to start living. My heart thudded. Renowned historian Eleanor had noticed my private drawing peeking from my notebook, her gaze demanding I reveal it for a chance at something real. That evening lingered as I faced her in the dim reading room, the air thick with what might unravel. Sharp heels echoed down the narrow corridor, pulling me from the stack of yellowed envelopes. The archive's main hall felt smaller when she entered, her presence filling the cluttered shelves like authority given form. Eleanor Voss, the historian whose books on forgotten women's lives lined university libraries, moved with the deliberate grace of someone who unearthed truths others buried. Her wool coat brushed against a cart of artifacts, releasing a faint scent of rain-soaked earth from outside. I strained my apron, fingers still smudged with ink from morning cataloging. My days blurred into this routine, sorting relics under fluorescent hum, gloved hands lifting fragile diaries and faded photographs, always careful not to let my own thoughts spill onto the pages. In the locked bottom drawer of my desk sat my sketches, quick lines capturing the quiet strength in those old portraits, women whose stories mirrored the ones I kept folded inside me. No one here knew. Scrutiny came with questions, and questions led to places I wasn't ready to go. She paused at my table, scanning the misfiled letter I'd just pulled from a bound volume. "This should be with the 191 correspondence," she said, her voice low and measured, like she was addressing a conference hall rather than the empty air around us. Her eyes, sharp gray, framed by glasses perched on a strong nose, lingered on my ink-stained fingers, then flicked to the open notebook beside me. The corner of a sketch curled there, a half-drawn face of a suffragette I'd imagined from the letters. I nodded, sliding the letter back into place. "You're right. I'll recatalog it now." Professional distance. That's what kept the walls up. But her gaze held, tracing the lines on my hand as if reading a manuscript. She leaned closer, the lamplight catching the silver threads in her dark hair. "That drawing," she said, tapping the notebook lightly. "It's not just idle. You see them, the women in these archives, like I do. Hidden. Waiting to be uncovered." Heat rose in my chest. I closed the notebook, but too late. Her expression shifted, not judgmental, but hungry for something deeper. "I've watched you here, day after day, guarding more than these papers. If you undress your secret for me, I'll show you how to start living." The words hung in the still air, her voice wrapping around them like smoke from a distant fire. My heart thudded against my ribs, the audience's the archive's quiet, amplifying each beat. Undress my secret. What did she mean? The sketches? Or the pull I'd felt reading those old loves? Women loving women in coded words, echoes of my own unspoken yearnings. I deflected, folding my arms over the table. "Dr. Voss, this is a restricted area. Drawings aren't part of the collection." She didn't retreat. Instead, she pulled a chair across from me, the scrape echoing softly. "Call me Eleanor. And that's precisely why I'm here. I've been researching a new exhibit on suppressed queer histories. Figures like the ones you sketch, I suspect. But it's incomplete without fresh eyes, someone who feels their weight." Her fingers drummed once on the table, calloused from years turning pages in dusty sites. "I can offer funding. For your studies, perhaps. Art history, if that's your hidden path. A grant to pursue what you bury in that drawer." Stakes settled heavy, like silt in a stirred riverbed. Funding meant escape from this endless sorting, a chance to claim the sketches as more than midnight escapes. But vulnerability? Sharing those lines meant letting her see the isolation I'd wrapped around myself, the guarded heart that sketch desires it never voiced. Her eyes held mine, sensing the pull beneath my words, the quiet storm of recognition. Why me? I asked, voice steady, despite the thud in my chest. Because you understand the cost of hiding, she replied, her tone softening, empathy threading through. I've lost someone to that silence. My partner, years ago, her stories erased by time and fear. I won't let that happen again. Not to these women, not to you. She slid a card across the table, her name embossed in simple black. Meet me tonight. Show me one sketch. Let me show you a way forward. I took the card, the paper cool against my skin. Resistance tugged, but the proposition lingered, unraveling the edges of my routine. Night fell outside the high windows, shadows lengthening across the shelves. Her card burned in my pocket as doubt settled like silt, thick and unyielding, pulling me toward whatever came next. That night, sleep came in fits, the archive's shadows clinging to my mind. I'd always sketched in secret, late under the desk lamp in my small apartment, the glow pooling on yellowed notepaper. Women from the past took shape there, strong jaws, eyes holding unspoken fire, their hands linked in ways the official records never captured. One, a poet from the 192s, her face I'd pieced from fragmented letters, lips parted as if whispering to a lover the world forbade. Those lines mirrored the ache I buried, desires folded away like the documents I handled daily. No one saw. Exposure meant questions about why a woman like me, plain, routine-bound, drew such intimacies from history's margins. Morning light filtered through the archive's tall windows, gray and unrelenting. I arrived early, gloved hands diving back into the stacks, sorting ledgers from the suffrage era. The air hung heavy with old paper's musty scent, dust stirring as I turned pages. Routine steadied me, a barrier against the card still tucked in my apron pocket. But then her heels echoed again, sharper this time, cutting through the quiet like insistence. Eleanor appeared at the doorway coat shed, a flannel scarf draped loose around her neck. She carried a worn leather satchel, stuffed with what looked like research notes. "Good morning," she said, voice even, as if last night's words hadn't upended my world. She moved to the adjacent table, spreading documents, letters yellowed at the edges, photographs of women in bloomers marching under faded banners. "I'm pulling materials for the exhibit on forgotten figures, the ones society silenced. You know them well, I think." I nodded, keeping my eyes on the ledger. But she persisted, sliding a photo across the divide. A group of women, arms linked, gazes defiant. These suffragettes hid more than votes in their fight. Coded affections, partnerships the law ignored, like the sketches you guard. Her scarf brushed my arm as she leaned in, the wool soft against my sleeve, carrying a faint trace of lavender from some distant field. The air thickened, old paper mingling with her nearness, making my thoughts cloud. I pulled back, heart thudding low. "Dr. Voss, Eleanor, last night was unexpected. I catalog. That's my role." Fear coiled in my chest, exposure's edge sharp. What if she saw not just the art, but the guarded heart behind it? The isolation of wanting what history whispered but never named. My sketches weren't idle. They were confessions. Women loving in shadows, echoing the quiet yearnings I'd never voiced aloud. She paused, fingers tracing a letter's crease. Her eyes softened, gray depths holding a grief I hadn't noticed before. "I understand hiding. My partner, Lila, she documented queer lives in the 70s, before it was safe. Time silenced her. Archives like this buried her work under unreliable sources. I lost her to illness, but the real theft was the erasure." Her voice cracked once, brief as a settling dust mote. "It mirrors your isolation, doesn't it? Pouring truth into lines no one sees." Empathy tugged at me, her loss a bridge to my own. The archive's quiet amplified it, shelves watching like silent witnesses. I hesitated, gloved fingers hovering over my notebook. Small concession. I flipped it open, revealing the suffragette sketch. The woman's eyes met the page's edge, hand extended toward an unseen other. Eleanor's gaze fell there, softening further, breath catching in the hush. "It's beautiful," she murmured, leaning closer without touching. "You capture the unspoken, the pull, the risk. Tension built in that quiet, her presence warm against the cool air, my pulse steady but insistent. The sketch lay bare between us, a thread pulling tighter. She straightened, gathering her notes. Come to my office tomorrow. Bring more. We could collaborate, your eyes on these histories. No more hiding. The invitation hung, risk laced through it like ink on vellum. I nodded, the revelation lingering, drawing me, despite the fear churning inside. The next evening, I stood outside Eleanor's office door, the university building's stone facade cool under my palm. Lamplight spilled from the window, warm against the dusk, pulling me forward despite the knot in my stomach. I brought the notebook, its cover worn from too many secretive flips. The archive's routine felt distant now, replaced by this pull toward her invitation. I knocked, soft as a settling page. Come in, her voice called, steady and inviting. The door creaked open to a room that breathed history. Leather-bound books lining walls, grit-dusted shelves holding maps curled at the edges. A single lamp cast golden pools over her desk, where papers lay scattered like unearthed thoughts. Eleanor looked up from a volume, her flannel shirt sleeves rolled to the elbows, revealing calloused hands from years of fieldwork, digging through pasts long buried. She gestured to the chair opposite, her proximity already like a gathering storm, quiet but insistent. I sat, placing the notebook between us like a fragile truce. You wanted more sketches, I said, my voice halting, words bumping against the air. The room smelled of aged ink and faint wood polish, grounding me as I opened to the poet's face, lines I'd drawn in stolen hours. She leaned in, eyes tracing the curves without touching. Tell me about her, she prompted, voice deliberate, drawing me out like thread from a spool. We started with hidden histories, the suffragettes' coded letters, partnerships veiled in dear friends. Her explanations flowed slow, deliberate, pulling me into the rhythm. Mine came halting, admissions slipping free. How the archive's silence mirrored my own. Sketches born from nights when routine pressed too heavy. You're escaping into them, she observed. Not accusing, just seeing. Her hands, rough from turning soil in forgotten sites, rested near mine on the desk. I nodded, vulnerability cracking open. It's more than escape. The women in these pages, they loved despite everything. I sketched to feel that pull, the one I keep locked away. She listened without judgment, gray eyes steady, the lamp's glow softening the lines of her face. As evenings blurred, her backstory emerged in fragments. Scholarly battles first, tenure fights over unsubstantiated queer narratives, colleagues dismissing her partner's work as fringe. Lila documented lives like these, she said one night, voice low over tea steaming in chipped mugs. She chased echoes in oral histories, women who built quiet worlds. After her death, cancer, quick and cruel, the loneliness settled like dust I couldn't shake. Her fingers tightened on the mug, calluses pale against the porcelain. I seek authentic echoes now, in archives, in people, like you. Empathy bridged us, her grief a shadow to my isolation. We pored over documents, her shoulder brushing mine as we unfolded a fragile map of early women's networks. The paper crackled, air thick with old glue in her nearness, a storm building in the quiet. These lines connect them, she murmured, pointing to faded roots. My hand shifted, brushing hers. Accidental, electric. Skin met skin, rough against smooth, and silence filled between us, full and heavy, like vellum waiting for ink. I pulled back first, heart thudding low, but the jolt lingered, warming the room's edges. We spoke on, her deliberate cadence weaving with my halting truths, evenings stretching as trust took root. Weeks passed in these meetings, the office a sanctuary from the archive's cold shelves. I'd arrive with sketches tucked under arm, her door always ajar. Conversations deepened, her loneliness after Lila, battles to preserve suppressed voices, my routine as cage, sketches as breath. One night, over a shared ledger of coded diaries, her hand steadied mine on the page, calluses grounding me. You're more than guardian of these ghosts, she said softly. Let me help you claim your own story. My walls thinned like worn vellum, edges fraying under her gaze. The storm of her proximity no longer threatened. It promised rain, life after drought. Yet doubt lingered, a quiet ache. Could I undress that far? Let her see the desires sketched in shadow? Our collaboration pulled us deeper into the archive's alcoves, away from the office's warm lamplight. Days blurred into joint hunts through the stacks, uncovering a cache of letters from Eleanor Ames, a 193's botanist whose coded notes hinted at a life entwined with another woman. The parallels struck me hard. Her hidden affections veiled in talk of shared gardens and secret blooms, echoing the desires I'd sketched in silence. We worked side by side in the dim storage room, the air thick with the scent of aged bindings and faint mildew, shelves pressing close like confidants. Eleanor's explanations slowed as we deciphered the inks, her voice a low murmur that filled the narrow space. "See here," she'd say, her finger tracing faded script, eyes holding mine longer than before, gray depths pulling me in. The alcove's shadows softened her features, making the moment stretch, charged with unspoken weight. I'd nod, pulse quickening, her nearness a quiet intrusion, flannel sleeve grazing my arm, the grit of dust settling on our clothes like unspoken confessions. My confusion grew with each session, heart slamming against my ribs when she leaned in to point out a metaphor, breath warm on my neck during close examinations of brittle pages. I'd always assumed my yearnings were just echoes from the past, buried under routine and isolation. But her presence stirred them, questioning long-held certainties. Feelings for women? I'd never named them, never let them surface beyond sketches. Now, in these hushed corners, they pressed forward, raw and uncharted, her empathy making the air feel heavier, closer. Dust clung to our aprons as we knelt before a low shelf, unrolling Ames's pressed flowers, delicate relics of forbidden gardens. Her breath ghosted my ear, explaining the symbolism, petals overlapping like intertwined lives. "She hid in plain sight," Eleanor whispered, her voice deliberate, warm against my skin. I froze, the intimacy of it sending a jolt through me, thoughts clouding with the heat of her proximity. The archive's quiet amplified everything, our shared space a cocoon where professional lines blurred into something personal, insistent. One afternoon, as sunlight slanted through a high grate, her proposition evolved. We sat cross-legged amid the letters, her satchel open between us. "This work needs your voice," she said, eyes steady on mine. "Co-author a paper with me. Credit your insights on Ames's codes, your sketches as illustrations. But it demands full honesty, no more half-drawn truths." Her calloused hand rested near the page, not touching, but the offer hung there, a bridge over my guarded depths. Funding for my art studies dangled too, tied to this vulnerability, stepping from shadows into print, claiming space in her world. I hesitated, gloved fingers twisting a letter's edge. Guarded empathy welled up, her gaze inviting it out. "I grew up in a small town," I shared, voice low, the words tumbling like silt stirred from riverbed. Books were my escape, but feelings like these, wanting women in stories, in real life, meant whispers, suppression. My family called it confusion. I called it silence. The admission settled heavy, childhood's weight surfacing in the dim light. She nodded, her own grief threading through. Lila faced that too, hiding her research, her love, until it wore her down. After she went, the silence echoed louder. Her voice cracked softly, eyes distant for a beat, then returning to mine with quiet resolve. "We don't have to repeat it. Honesty builds the legacy." The project's urgency mirrored my inner storm, letters piling like unanswered questions. Late one evening, as we locked the alcove, the weight pressed too much. "Eleanor," I said, turning to her in the emptying hall, "there's more to Undress. My sketches aren't just history. They're me, wanting what Ames did." The confession hung, pulling us toward whatever storm brewed next, her hand brushing mine in the fading light. The words escaped in the emptying hall, echoing off the stone walls like a page torn loose. Eleanor's hand lingered on mine for a breath, her calluses rough against my palm, before she pulled away. We moved to the storage room without speaking, the door clicking shut behind us, sealing the archive's hush around our shared confession. Boxes of unsorted letters loomed in the dimness, the air heavy with the scent of dry paper and faint ink, shadows pooling at our feet from the single overhead bulb. She turned her crate into a makeshift seat, gesturing for me to join her. "Tell me," she said, voice low, deliberate, her gray eyes searching mine in the low light. But the vulnerability I'd cracked open twisted inward, doubt rising like silt stirred from the floor. We delved into Ames's final letters, the botanist's words growing bolder, hints of a lover's name hidden in botanical terms, a life she'd suppressed for safety. "We can't include this," I said suddenly, my finger halting on a coded phrase. "It's too raw. The exhibit board will bury it, call it speculation." Eleanor's brow furrowed, frustration etching lines around her mouth. "Suppressing it repeats the silence. That's what killed Lila's work. Academics deeming queer threads unreliable." Her voice sharpened, echoing my self-doubt, the fear that coiled in my chest. She stood, pacing the narrow space, her flannel shirt shifting with each step, releasing a trace of lavender into the stuffy air. "You're doing the same. Hiding your sketches, your truths. If we don't fight for these echoes, who will?" The argument built, words tumbling like crumbling bindings. I rose to match her, heart slamming against my ribs. "It's not that simple. Exposure means judgment, loss. My sketches, they're safe because no one sees." The storage room felt smaller, shelves pressing in, dust motes swirling in the bulb's glow as our voices overlapped. Her frustration mirrored my own, a storm of guarded hearts clashing in the confined space. I froze then, the weight crashing down. "I admit it," I whispered, voice breaking the tension. "I'm afraid of living openly. The sketches are my only outlet. For unspoken love, for wanting women like Ames did, like I do but never say." The revelation hung raw, my gloved hands trembling as I pulled the notebook from my apron, flipping to a page of intertwined figures, lines soft and yearning. Tears pricked my eyes, the archive's quiet amplifying the ache. Eleanor stopped pacing, her expression softening, grief surfacing like ink bleeding through paper. She sank onto the crate, voice cracking as she shared her hidden youth. "I know that fear. In the 80s, small-town grit and family expectations. I loved a woman first. Quiet meetings in library basements, her hand in mine under tables. Society's weight crushed it. She married to escape, left me with silence that echoed for years." Her words cracked open, vulnerability threading through, her calloused fingers twisting in her lap. "Lila pulled me from that cage, but losing her buried me again. Your sketches, they remind me of what I almost lost twice." We stood close now, inches apart in the storage room's confines, air heavy with unspoken pull. No touch, but the electric charge hummed between us, her breath steadying mine, the bulb's light casting shadows that danced like hesitant confessions. Dust settled on our shoulders, a shared grit binding the moment. Then stakes escalated, her voice firming. "The co-authorship, the funding. I'll withdraw it if you can't choose authenticity without reward. This isn't a transaction. It's a mirror to your cage." The words stung, testing the thaw beginning inside me. I realized then, her proposition had never been exchange, but a reflection of my own buried life, urging me toward light. Solitude followed as she left, the door's click echoing. I lingered among the letters, her absence aching like an unfinished page, lines waiting for ink that might finally flow free. Solitude wrapped around me like the archive's heaviest binding, days blurring into empty shelves and unanswered sketches. Eleanor's absence left echoes in the quiet halls, her words a persistent ache, urging me to face the cage I'd built. I spent nights alone, the desk lamp's glow harsh on unfinished lines, women reaching, always just out of touch. Her challenge lingered, authenticity without reward. It stirred something deep, a resolve forming like ink settling on damp paper. No more half-truths. I gathered my full sketchbook, pages thick with hidden years, hands trembling on the worn leather cover as dusk fell outside my window. The university path felt longer that evening, leaves crunching underfoot, carrying the chill of approaching night. Her office light spilled through the blinds, a beacon pulling me forward. I knocked, the sound sharp in the corridor's hush. "Enter," she called, voice steady. No trace of the storm from our last words.
The door swung open to her office at dusk,
lamplight casting long shadows across our guarded faces. Eleanor sat at her desk, surrounded by scattered notes on Ames's letters, her flannel sweater draped over the chair back. She looked up, gray eyes widening slightly, surprise softening the lines of fatigue. You came. No question, just quiet acknowledgement. Her calloused hands pausing mid-page. I stepped inside, closing the door softly, the room's warmth enveloping me, scent of aged books and faint tea from a cooling mug. I brought this, I said, holding out the sketchbook, my voice low but firm. Tremors ran through my fingers, but I placed it on the desk between us, cover parting like a reluctant confession. All of it. No more hiding. She rose slowly, circling the desk without haste, her presence filling the space like settling dust. We sat side by side, the lamp's glow pooling over the open pages. First, the suffragette, her defiant gaze captured in quick strokes. Eleanor's fingers hovered near the edge, not touching, eyes tracing the lines with genuine care. This strength, she murmured. You've given her fire, the record's erased. Her praise landed soft. No flattery, just truth that chipped at my barriers, crumbling the walls I'd held so tight. We turned pages together, vulnerability unfolding like the sketches themselves. The poet emerged next, lips curved in quiet yearning, hand extended to shadow. I pointed to the faint codes in the margins, notes from Ames's letters I'd woven in. These aren't just drawings, I admitted, voice halting at first, then steadying. They're what I feel, buried under routine, wanting connections like theirs, real and unspoken. Her nod came slow, empathy in the tilt of her head, as she shared a fragment of her own youth, a first love's coded note, lost to time's grit. The air shifted, sensory release threading through. Her flannel sweater brushed my arm as she leaned closer, wool soft and warm against my sleeve, carrying lavender's faint echo. Silence broke then with honest laughter, mine sharp and surprised, when she traced a clumsy early sketch of intertwined hands. This one's raw, she said, chuckling low, the sound loosening something in my chest. Like first drafts of history, imperfect but true. The laughter echoed soft, barriers thinning further, the room's shadows dancing lighter now. We lingered over the final pages, emotional bonds weaving tighter. Futures unbound by secrets, she said, eyes on a sketch of women walking open paths, no shadows. My dream's a legacy that includes us, exhibits crediting hidden voices, yours among them. Co-author the paper, illustrate with these, step into it. Her words painted possibilities, no longer caged by doubt. I nodded, the ache easing into warmth. I want that, a life where sketches aren't escapes, but starts. Subtle shift came in glances, eyes meeting longer, empathy turning to quiet longing, held in check by the space between us. No lines crossed, just the pull, steady and unspoken, like vellum waiting for careful ink. Her hand rested near mine on the page, calluses a reminder of shared grit. Collaboration deepened from there, pulling us into public scholarly circles, preparations for the exhibit, voices blending in planning meetings. The archive no longer felt like a cage, but a door cracking open. The conference hall loomed like an unearthed ruin, its high ceilings echoing with footsteps of scholars milling before the panels. We'd co-presented our findings on Ames's hidden life, the botanist's coded gardens, now a centerpiece for the exhibit. My nerves churned like silt in a rushing river, the weight of the room pressing on my chest. Sketches from my book illustrated the slides, women's faces I'd drawn, now projected large, their yearning lines exposed to strangers. Eleanor had insisted, your vision completes this. But standing beside her in the green room, apron traded for a simple blouse, I felt the blur of roles, archivist to co-creator, hidden to scene. Preparation had blurred days into intensity. We'd rehearsed in empty halls after hours, the university's stone corridors cool and echoing our words. Her guidance came firm yet tender, hand gesturing to mark pauses in our script. Here, emphasize the codes, she'd say, voice deliberate, stepping close to adjust my stance. The air carried faint polish from the floors, her flannel scarf brushing my shoulder as she demonstrated a slide transition. Intimacy wove through it, her calloused fingers pointing to notes, eyes meeting mine in the hush, studying the tremor in my voice. You've earned this space, she'd murmur, proximity warm, pulling me from doubt's grip. Those moments built quiet strength, her belief chipping at my lingering cage. On stage now, the audience filled rows. Academics in tweed, notes rustling like dry leaves. Lights warmed the podium, dust motes invisible but felt in the dry air. Eleanor opened, her presence commanding, gray eyes scanning the crowd as she outlined Ames's suppressions. Then my turn. Sketches integrated. My voice halting at first, describing the intertwined hands I'd drawn from her letters. These lines reveal not just botany, but bonds society buried, I said, pulse thudding low. Claiming space as co-creator blurred our statuses, her renown lifting mine, my insights grounding hers. The projector hummed, my art filling the screen, no longer locked in drawers. Midway, confrontation struck. A colleague from the board, tall, spectacled, voice dripping skepticism, rose during questions. Intriguing, Dr. Voss, but the illustrations from an archivist's hobby sketches? How do we verify their scholarly weight? His words landed sharp, echoing my old fears, the room's hush amplifying judgment. Heat rose in my face, silt stirring to muddle my thoughts. Eleanor straightened beside me, her hand brushing the podium's edge, calluses pale under the lights. Verify? She replied, voice firm, fierce defense cutting the air. Clara's work uncovers what texts alone miss. The emotional truth in Ames's codes, mirrored in these drawings. She's not hobbyist, she's collaborator. Her eye for hidden desires affirming what we've chased for months. Her gaze flicked to me, affirming my worth, gray depths holding steady. The room shifted, murmur softening her words into validation. No transaction, just alliance, her standing for mine, blurring lines further. Backstage, after, as applause faded, peak connection hummed in the dim wing. The curtain's heavy fabric muffled the crowd, air thick with lingering stage dust. Her hand steadied mine, fingers intertwining, brief, rough against smooth. Words unspoken but felt deeply, the pull of shared risk, empathy turning warmer in the shadows. You were brilliant, she whispered, breath close, lavender faint from her scarf. My heart slammed, the touch electric yet held, a quiet longing threading through. Reversal came in the Q&A's close. A question on Ames's legacy hung. I let it, voice gaining quiet authority. Her gardens weren't solitary. They bloomed in secret partnerships, much like the women we still silence. The audience leaned in, drawn to the calm certainty I'd claimed, Sketch's truth resonating. Eleanor nodded beside me, pride in her tilt, our partnership visible now. Success lingered as we exited, hall lights harsh after the stage's glow. But personal truths demanded final undressing. The exhibit's launch loomed, my sketches public. Yet the deeper secret between us waited, pulling toward confession in the quiet after. The conference's echoes faded as we stepped into the museum gardens, the night air cool against my skin, carrying the faint grit of city dust from the paths. Leaves rustled underfoot, soft as turning pages, the high walls of the building behind us a shadowed outline. Success from the panel lingered, but the real weight pressed now, personal truths waiting in the quiet. Eleanor walked beside me, her flannel scarf loose around her neck, the wool brushing her collar with each step. No words at first, just the rhythm of our breathing sinking in the dim lantern light. I stopped near a stone bench, the chill seeping through my blouse as I turned to her. Eleanor, that pull between us, it's more than collaboration. Your gaze in the alcoves, the way your hand steadies mine over letters. I feel it, deep, like the sketches coming alive. My voice trembled low, the confession spilling like ink from a tipped bottle. Vulnerability hung there, raw in the open air, no archive walls to hide behind. She faced me, gray eyes catching the lantern's glow, softening the lines of her face. I feel it too, she admitted, voice deliberate, no rush in her words. From that first sketch you showed, the truth in your lines, it stirred something I thought buried with Lila. Not replacement, but a new echo, quiet and real. No hurry, just this truth between us. Her calloused hand reached for mine then, fingers intertwining, slow, rough warmth grounding the cool night. We stood like that, the garden's hush wrapping us, empathy mending old wounds through shared gaze, hers holding mine steady, pulling the isolation from my chest. Life shifted in the weeks after. She funded my independent exhibit, a small gallery space in the museum's wing. Sketches no longer locked away, but framed under soft lights. I stepped into my art without hiding, lines flowing free during days that blended archive work with studio hours. Ink stained my fingers openly now, no gloves to conceal. The scent of fresh paper mixing with the grit of past relics. Her presence became a steady warmth, evenings in her office turning to walks like this, conversations deepening without the cage of secrets. We embraced the unknown together, her scholarly battles now ours, pushing the exhibit to include more coded histories, my illustrations claiming space beside her research. Wounds mended slow, her grief surfacing in quiet admissions over tea, mine easing as I voiced the yearnings once sketched in shadow. One night, amid the garden's blooming night jasmine, she squeezed my hand. You've undressed not just secrets, but started living them. The word settled like silt finding riverbed. Peace in the pull, drawing us forward. Our path opened beyond dusty shelves, collaborations pulling us into lectures, shared panels where my voice held equal weight. The archive door closed softly behind us that final evening, key turning with a click, our steps echoing lighter into the night. Futures unbound. Her words echoed in the garden hush. My secret undressed. Life beginning in earnest. If this resonated, subscribe for more stories of hidden truths and quiet courage. Tell me below, what secret would you undress for a chance to live fully?